On this episode, I host venture capitalist Scott Sorochak. Having grown companies from day one to over $100 million in revenue these past 25 years, Scott is something of an expert in scaling businesses. As you'll hear, Scott is a savvy entrepreneur with a nose for success, and because of this, his companies have fundraised over $150 million from top-tier Silicon Valley investors. In this conversation, we dig into Scott's experience, expertise, as well as his favorite books, quotes, strategies for scaling businesses, and enjoying what you do. If anyone wants to learn more about Scott's story or Blarney Ventures, make sure to follow him on LinkedIn or search through this episode on podsource.org. So without further ado, welcome through
Jarvis,
the wire.
drop my needle.
Scott, glad to have you here.
Thanks, Jeremy. Glad to be here.
So why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got started, with this science.
Yeah. So the short version is just celebrating my 30th year here in Silicon Valley, which I close my eyes and just can't believe it's been 3 decades. But I moved out in '88 from Boston, graduated computer science degree, and was just really fascinated with a lot of the technology that was coming out of the Valley back then. It was only a few years after Steve Jobs had announced the Macintosh. Microsoft had just gone public, so I figured as an engineer, sort of computer science geek, Silicon Valley was a place to be. I quickly found that after a couple of years of doing sort of sales engineering and kind of creating high-level architecture diagrams for all my sales reps, that a couple of years into that, I was still driving a '69 Plymouth Valiant with rust and holes in the floorboards, and the sales reps were out driving M3s and M5s, and said, geez, there's got to be a better way to make money. So I went to my VP of sales and said, hey, I really love the company. I really don't want to quit. But I want you to teach me everything about sales and marketing so that I can eventually drive one of those M3s. And so the long and sordid history is I made that career move when I was 23. And when I look back at my career, I think a lot of my successes and quite frankly some of the learnings I've had from my failures has really emanated from a strong technical background and really understanding what customer and clients' needs are first, and then finding problems or finding solutions rather that can address those problems rather than sort of coming at it from a straight sales perspective where I'm just trying to hit quota. So, I've been in a lot of startups. I've been at companies that have gone from 0 to 100 million and gone public. I've gotten some tremendous work experience, and I find that my experience has mostly come with some of the companies that I've been with that have failed miserably, just to really understand why they failed. Was it the people? Was it the product? Was it wrong timing? Was it underfunded? And so over the course of the last 10 years, I've been involved with a lot of private equity, a lot of venture-backed companies, and just really helping them to grow and to reach profitability so that they're self-sustaining. So that's kind of the long and short of it.
So it sounds like you certainly fall into the camp of people that really want to focus on I guess interdisciplinary would be a good word for it. Being able to tackle problems from multiple angles. And so, do you think is this something that's native to you? Even in your engineering days, you would go at it from a sort of alternative approach.
Yeah, I think that's right. I mean, said another way, most startups, if you haven't had a long history of startups where you've learned along the way, and then your 5th or 6th startup, most founders of startups, I find, obviously extremely intelligent, hardworking, but the challenge is a lot of them don't know what they don't know. And by that I mean, you can have a great technology, a great product, a great service. It could be 2 PhDs out of Stanford, where they get to sort of an MVP, because the product's great. But if you don't know how to build a pipeline, if you don't know how to build an effective product timeline, where you're meeting and hitting goals and objectives on time, on budget, if you don't know how to sell effectively and build financial models to get to profitability, you can have the best product in the world, but it's not going to get to product market fit or certainly to scale. And so when I heard you ask the question, what came to mind is, problem solving from a number of different sort of functional areas within the company early on, and helping to create playbooks that are from people that have learned along the way how to build those functional areas cost effectively and at scale is where I spend a lot of my time. So that's kind of the best way I can answer that. Is it's not just in a technical area, it's really helping startups to understand where they're weak and where they need some help, and then really create those playbooks so that they can then apply that to their business and make their business more effective.
So are there any playbooks that come to mind, or any formulas that you've found extend across all different kinds of startups? Maybe not formulas as in you must do XYZ, but trends that you've seen, mistakes people have made or whatnot.
Yeah, I mean, it's a much longer answer. And the reason is because I could kind of break down almost, any startup's business into their functional areas, whether it's operations, finance, sales, marketing, product engineering, and find areas of weakness that are areas for improvement. And what I've tried to do is build my own playbooks over 30 years. And I've honed them and, improved them over time to just really be broadly applicable across most businesses. And so in our most recent company, we work with over 100 companies and across 15 different vertical market segments, and those playbooks have worked pretty extensively across those verticals. So, an example of that would be if you're in the marketing group, if you're in the lead generation group, and you have come in as a director of lead gen, you bought your marketing application platform, whether that's Marketo, Eloqua, pick your favorite market application platform. You've built out the sales tools to be able to support calling and housing your data in a CRM. And you've built out your call scripts and your email scripts. Well, how are you going to measure the effectiveness of your marketing reps, your BDRs, SDRs, and your sales reps? There's a lot of KPIs that companies have at a very high level, such as CAC, or cost of customer acquisition, attrition, upsell, cross-sell. But there's probably 15 to 20 others that I find when I go into startups that the companies are not tracking, and they're not measuring, and they're not optimizing. And that's an example of where, having a playbook where you can come in and you can teach the either executives or in this case, director of lead gen and Marcom, how they need to be measuring their campaigns and how they're measuring the leads over into sales as opportunities. It's talked a lot about, but it's really, in my opinion, has not found mass market adoption across many startups. And that's where you get into a lot of problems, when you kind of kid yourself as to whether the leads are good quality or whether they create great opportunities. And then all of a sudden, you're a month, you're a quarter, you're 2 quarters behind filling the funnel, and then you have no sales. So that's one example. It's kind of long-winded, but I just wanted to kind of give an illustrative example of what I meant.
No, that's a really helpful way to think about it. You mentioned something else also. I was actually lucky enough to see Reid Hoffman speak last night down in Palo Alto. And for anyone who doesn't know, he's the CEO of LinkedIn. He was involved in PayPal in the early days, and just one of the maybe Silicon Valley acolytes. And it's interesting that you both mentioned how there are these similarities across industries. The playbook that you're referring to, Scott, it can be used in medical research, and it can be used in robotics versus a consumer product. And I think you might agree that finding the right playbook, as you've said, is what's most important.
Yeah, and to touch on that, it's interesting that you seen Reid Hoffman yesterday. I'm going to misquote him exactly, but I'll paraphrase. There's a great quote that he has that says something to the effect of, for startups, if you're spending, or if you have built out a product, an initial product, and it's taken you 6 to 12 months, you're probably spending too much time on it. And the whole notion that he's really trying to get across is, if you've got an idea on a product or a service that is either disruptive or game changing, you obviously don't want to put it out in the market where every piece of it, from the user experience to sign on registration to support, is broken. But it doesn't need to be perfect. You have to get out there. You have to listen to customers. You've got to listen to the prospects that you're pitching to, and you optimize along the way. And that's how great products are built. Go back to the very first, I can certainly do it because I'm old enough, but go back to the very first days when Facebook was launched. It was launched as largely for universities. You couldn't even sign on if you didn't have a university address. And the way that Zuck launched that product is, it was really in very rudimentary phases to what it looks like today, 13, 15 years later, whatever it is. And it was just optimized over and over and over and over again. And those are typically the best ways to develop products, because you're taking feedback from customers, you're understanding what people are using your product for, what they're not using it for, why they're using it, why they're not using it. And so for me, I've taken all of those learnings, to tie this up in a bow from your first question, and built out playbooks that have helped optimize all of those different functional areas within a company very, very, very rapidly, so that you don't have to spend $1 million, $2 million, $3 million on your seed round in order to then just test all of this. You can get to a place where you're generating revenue, you're generating customers, and you're getting better at your financial models by building out and testing the thesis that you had going into what you developed early on for the product or the service that you have.
And it's a really great thing about technology, and I guess just modern business, is how fast the product cycles are. We can really just evaluate, and you can test your hypotheses day after day and unwrap a new product, 3 days from now.
Well, and the key to that, Jeremy, is really about testing, but testing and then making sure that you are testing with a certain set of criteria that keeps you objective. So by that I mean, too many founders, I find, by the time they've thought about the product or service of the company they want to build to the time that they launch, is typically 6 months, 12 months, 18 months. They're very, very passionate and emotional about what they've built. They're excited to get it out in the marketplace. And then a lot of the decisions that they're making are very emotionally driven. And what I try to coach founders on is, it's nice to be emotional when you're on stage and you're pitching your product at a conference. It's great when you're in front of investors. They like to see that. But when you're making decisions based on features, functionality, and otherwise how you're building a product, you have to keep emotion out of it, and you have to let the data drive the decisions around what you're building and then how you're slightly changing the product. And if you are disciplined around that, that's where you see products really, really excel and get there to product market fit really quickly.
So before we wrap up, I have a couple more questions. First of all, do you have any books or podcast listens or audiobooks to recommend to people how to, figure out this playbook on their own?
There's so many. I mean, I could probably send you a list, and you could probably put them on this audio cast at the very bottom. But Lean Startup, I know it's very popular, but I love that book. It's a very, very broken down to the studs way of how companies need to think about their business and how they need to operate quickly. And that's one that I would just throw out there for people to read if you haven't read that. Radical Candor is another really, really good book. It's about looking at your business in a very candorous way and trying to be objective about the things that are working, the things that aren't, kind of getting back to my point about taking the emotional aspect of how you're building your business out of the equation and really looking at how to optimize your business each and every day with your team. So those are two that come to mind.
Awesome. And so I guess maybe the meat of this conversation has been about and I'll suggest a podcast to anyone listening. It's been very helpful for me being, a startup founder. So Scott Belsky on the Tim Ferriss show, he talks about the messy middle.
Got it.
I guess the question there is, what kind of strategies and what's one actionable tactic that, a young founder can put into place tomorrow?
Yeah, so actionable tactic, that's kind of broad reaching. Are you referring to just related to the business or building product or the team or what?
Sure. We haven't touched on the team yet. How about building out a good team? So it's the core of everything, no?
Yeah, I'll keep using some of these quotes from people that I really respect in the industry. I mentioned him earlier, Steve Jobs. There's a famous quote by Steve Jobs where he talks about, he's never understood why companies and leaders hire people and then tell them what to do. His quote is, we hire really good people and we take the time to interview them and take them through, the Apple process, because once we hire them, we want them to be able to tell us what to do. So the whole message around that is, Steve Jobs has, and had so many different exceptional qualities, from product design to engineering, to certainly speaking and promoting and marketing. But there were a lot of areas where, Steve Jobs was not great in. And when you hire really good people around you, you're looking to complement your skill set. So that's part of the advice I would give entrepreneurs, is really look for people that are not yes men or yes women. They are complementary to your skill sets, and that you feel as if they were capable of leading your organization. That's one of the best things you can find in a company at the executive leadership level, is that, if you were unfortunately hit by a bus tomorrow, that the company could continue on and maybe not be run as effectively, but certainly, the company would not come to a grinding halt. And that is also something that I do not see very common in startups. There's just simply too many people that are hired either based on friendships, or they're hired based on people that you like, or that interview well, or that look good on paper, but that do not execute and do not provide sort of that accretive value to where the existing founder skill sets are.
So sorry to interrupt, but so I mean, just for me personally, it's something that I think about a lot and have been trying to. We've been trying to find these critical feedback loops, and as a founder or someone involved in this space, how do you go about hiring and reaching out to people that will be critical with you? Because it's not something you can put on a job application.
Yeah, I'll answer that and maybe give one other answer to a question you may have wanted to ask. And that is, when I look back at my 30 years in the Valley, I think one of the things that I'm most proud of is the networking. And I've got 3 daughters, 2 of which are in the professional industries now. And, I've coached them early on that, you need to be in any industry networking. And I'm, proud of the people that I'm connected with on LinkedIn. I don't go for volume, I go for quality. And so one of the pieces of advice I would give all young people as well as entrepreneurs is continue to network every single day. I have a goal of adding at least 2 to 3 high quality contacts, to my network every single day. Again, it's not about just blasting off random invites. It's about bringing people into your network that are strategic to not only your network, but then you can also provide value. And then getting to your question, the reason why, I've been able to, build companies really quickly and hire people that I feel are accretive to me are people that are in my network. Now, that doesn't mean that of all the people that are on my LinkedIn network that I'm, quote unquote, friends with. These are people that eventually, I believe, I can either provide value to them, or that I think if I start a company, hey, this might be somebody that I'd want to bring on to run client success management or head of technology. And so, number one is network, never stop. And number two is, go to your either board or go to your LinkedIn connections and really search for those people that you've brought into your fold that you feel could be, massively accretive to your business. That's probably the best advice I can give, even on this podcast.
Thanks for that, Scott. And maybe, one last question. I know you got to run, but so, it's been played out a lot in Silicon Valley in the last couple of years, but I'll offer two versions of Peter Thiel's question. There's the one, what's one thing that you believe that most people would disagree with you? Or the alternative maybe is, what's one thing you've changed your mind about in the last 3 years?
Yeah, good question. The first one, could you repeat the first one more time? I was trying to really think of the best answer for the last one.
Yeah. So what's one thing that you've changed your mind about? That was the second question. What's one thing that you believe that most people would disagree with you on?
I think most people would disagree with me on the fact that you have to build a company that gets to profitability quickly. I think most people believe that you have to build a business that's profitable and that is going to be self-sustaining. And I know I've talked a lot about sort of building playbooks throughout this podcast and how you do that. But that's not necessarily the most efficient way to build a business. You can build a loyal customer base where you're not necessarily generating massive revenue, but over time, over 6, 12, 18 months, you're building tremendous value. And if you build it and there's tremendous value that you're creating or expense that you're saving them, they will pay for it at some point. So that's kind of one. And then the second one was, what was it related to?
It was just one thing that you've changed your mind about in the last 3 years.
I would say, honestly, work ethic. This will be a little bit of an eyebrow raiser to your audience, but I have always felt, and maybe this was just my upbringing, that if you work hard, you put in a lot of hours, and you sort of become a domain expert, that will sort of beget others to work equally as hard, as long hours, and hopefully see something at the end of that. And I've been a little disenfranchised in the last few years. I've had a lot of experiences where, just because I'm working hard doesn't necessarily mean that others are working hard. And there's a difference between working hard, working smart, and getting shit done. But at the same time, I've noticed that there is a little bit more of a passive way that people are working, and a little bit more entitlement and benefits that people are expecting. And I'm really struggling with that, because that's really not how I've built my career and how I've built businesses and worked with other leaders and individual contributors, not only here in the Valley, but around the world. And so I know it's a little long-winded, but I think that's one of the things that I've been a little bit jaded on in the last few years.
Scott Sorochak, Boston to San Francisco, Blarney Ventures. Thanks for joining us in the Source Pod, Scott.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Don't you want me to love you? I'm coming down fast, but I'm miles above you. Tell me, come on, tell me the answer. Well, you may be a lover, but you ain't no dancer.
I'm better now than I was when you saw that 22-year-old undeveloped kid running from Sunday Listeners. I'm experienced now, professional. Jaw's been broke, been lost, knocked down a couple times. Bad. Been chopping trees. I done something new for this fight. I done wrestled with an alligator. That's right. I have wrestled with an alligator. I done tussled with a whale. I done handcuffed lightning, throw thunder in jail. That's bad. Only last week, I murdered a rock, injured a stone, hospitalized a brick. I'm so mean, I make medicine sick.
Man, dude.
Yeah,
He knew that.
fast. Last night, I cut the light off in my bedroom, hit the switch, was in the bed before the room was dark.
Incredible.
Fast.
Incredible.
And you, George Foreman, all of you chumps are gonna bow when I whoop him. All of you. I know you got him. I know you got him picked. But the man's in trouble. I'm gonna show you how great I am.